Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Renee Savoy from the Connecticut State Department of Education in the Performance Office. Thank you for joining the April edition of the Dual Credit Community of Practice. Ajit is not on the line currently. He was called into a meeting with the legislature, and he's hoping that he'll be able to log on shortly. We'll see, maybe within the first 30 minutes. Depending on our pace in this session, will dictate whether or not we get a visit from Ajit, and maybe he can answer some of our questions if I am unable to do so. So I did send a message around letting everyone know that this particular community of practice meeting wouldn't be focused on any of the pathways. We've done quite a few of those more pathway focused discussions, but this was, since a lot of people are on vacation this week. I know we have a small group, about 16 people. I see quite a few IHE partners on here. That's great. So this will be a little bit of an office hours, a little bit of show and tell, maybe some reminders here and there, and a tiny bit of review. So, as always, stay for as long as you like. We record these sessions, they'll be posted, and hopefully we can get some questions asked and some answers delivered. So an agenda, let's see. I wanted to give you, again, we've done this before, but I wanted to give you a little bit of an update and a reminder about timelines on the dual credit expansion grant for districts. I will show you a grant or some screenshots of a grant expenditure report on EdSite that I think has been tweaked a little, and me personally, I find it a little more helpful in figuring out who hasn't tapped into their grant funds yet and how much is available and what your funding source is. We'll again revisit a grant update for our IHE. So I'm glad to see the IHE partners here. I can give you an update on where we stand on that. Some save the dates for NACEP events. NACEP is the National Alliance for Concurrent Enrollment Partnerships. We'll review that quickly. I know that in our last session, we mentioned the full report to the legislature on dual credit expansion efforts. I'm going to revisit that and go into a little more detail, or hopefully Ajit will if he joins us later. And then finally, we released a post-secondary earnings dashboard at the beginning of March. Maybe you've already seen it. If you haven't explored it yet, I would definitely encourage you to do that, but we'll demo that. And there are two resources associated with that dashboard. One was an announcement in Performance Matters in the March 2024 edition. There's a link on here. You should be able to click that link right from your screen. It should be active. If not, you'll also get it in the deck when I send you a link to the recording. And then finally, we did a behind the numbers session. These are webinars that the Performance Office started last year. We've done about, I want to say 7 or 8 of these, where we dig into where are the data coming from for some of the reports or some of the dashboards that we release through EdSite. And in the case of post-secondary earnings, we also really get into some of the limitations, some interpretive guidance. If you're interested in looking more closely at that dashboard, I would encourage you to take a look at that behind the numbers session, and that link here on the screen brings you to the recording of that. That was held on March 22nd, so not all that long ago. So a review for the dual credit, these are the district grants. So this is, again, kind of a progress report, a little bit of an update. So some of your districts are funded with ARP-ESSER funds, and other districts are funded with ARPA funds, and that makes a big difference in your timelines. Deadlines for obligation, deadlines for liquidation, etc. You can see the breakdown. We have more districts that are funded with ARP-ESSER. They're on the shorter time frame, but the dollar amounts are sort of close. So we've got a lot of our bigger districts are in that ARPA category. They have a little more time to spend their money. We can see as of yesterday, these are reimbursement requests. So about 358,000 or so for the ARP ESSER, the tighter timeline districts, and about 86,000 for the ARPA request. So we've gotten a lot more than 18 requests and 7 requests for reimbursement. Some districts have been putting in multiple requests, which is fine, but I wanted to give you an idea of the number of districts in each category who have actually requested reimbursement so far. I did hear a chat, so I'm going to take a quick look. Hello from Norwalk. Hi, Norwalk. Thanks for coming. So obligation deadlines are listed here. That's a pretty tight timeline. September 30th, 2024 is really not that far off in the distance. This is the deadline by which, if you're an ARP ESSER district, your funds have to be committed. That doesn't mean you've spent the money, but it is obvious in EGMS where that money is going to go, and you have records on your end, whether it be POs or however you're accounting for that locally. You need to make sure that that is solidified if you're an ARP ESSER district by September 30th. If you're funded with ARPA, you have until the end of this calendar year, the end of 2024. And the specifics of that obligation may not be obvious in EGMS, but for audit purposes, you need to make sure locally that you have those obligations solidified on your end. As far as liquidation, notice that there are different dates for district staff salaries versus contracted services. And so you have a much longer timeline if you're contracting for services. And I think the one thing that Ajit wanted to make sure I pointed out on this slide, and he certainly has more fiscal knowledge than I do. So when he jumps on, he might be able to add some commentary on this if you have specific questions. But really wanted to make sure that you ensure you have evidence of obligation for audit purposes. He wanted me to reiterate that. And then Dana's asking, she says, I thought I saw a list of which districts fall under which, but now I can't find that document. I actually can provide a link. Not really great at multitasking, but I'll get that link for you before the end. And I think there's actually another resource that'll help you if you're wondering where your district falls. I think the EdSite report actually can also provide you that information, which is the next slide that I'll move to, unless there are questions about this progress report first. So I'll pause, and if you have a question, you can raise your hand, and then I think you have the power to unmute yourself too. Okay, not seeing any hands going up. I know, everyone has different reasons for not having tapped their funds yet. In fact, I had one district who's not on the line today. I think they're on break this week. And he was asking me about liquidation deadlines. And I was joking with him, like, you need to get going on this. You haven't claimed anything yet. And time is tight. And he responded to me that they have a lot of teachers who are taking coursework in order to become credentialed to be able to instruct in a concurrent enrollment format. And so he was anticipating that a lot of that reimbursement request would happen during the summer. So that was one of his reasons. Other people are figuring out what kind of equipment they're going to be buying, and they anticipate those expenses happening soon. I would say, for the most part, many of the requests I've gotten that have been sizable so far have been for equipment. So expanding different pathways, expanding coursework, and the equipment that goes along with that. Okay, seeing no questions, I am going to look quickly at the EdSite grant expenditures report. Rather than try to do a live demo, I figured the screenshots are good enough and you should be able to kind of explore that independently. If you go to EdSite, you want to go to Fiscal Resources and then grant expenditures. And then you can search for the type of grant that you want to look up. And if you put dual credit in the search bar, you're going to get more than just this dashboard here. You're also going to get a table with every district. And Dana, this is where I think you're going to see your district's funding source listed. Because even though I'm searching on dual credit, the ARP ESSER and the ARPA money are combined in this visual. So the dual credit expansion for districts was about 3.8 million. So this visual is right. And you can see ARP ESSER, we've paid out a little bit more money in blue in that top bar versus ARPA, we've paid out a lot less. Again, with that blue bar there in that visual. And then if I were to scroll down this page, this is where you can see district level grant expenditures on that EdSite report. And what I did in this particular table is I clicked on grant paid. I sorted it from lowest to highest. So you can see the districts that haven't claimed any money yet. And if you look at the grant name column, that's where you see ARP ESSER versus ARPA. So I think that's going to answer your question, Dana. And you can export this to Excel as well. Any questions about the grant expenditures report on EdSite or any of the timelines, anything to do with the district grant? Okay, seeing none, I will go on to our next topic. Grants for IHEs. We talked about these grants in our last community of practice. Not a lot has changed since then, but we did get a few more IHEs who requested to be a part of this. So what we did is we invited public and private institutions of higher ed. We invited them to express interest in this grant that is, the purpose of it is to increase dual credit capacity. At the same time, reducing barriers, additional barriers for students from low-income families. So we're looking for those institutions to provide no-cost enrollment for these students for the next 3 years, but generally increasing dual credit capacity overall. We are up to 14 IHEs who have formally expressed interest, and there are at least 1 or 2 others that we haven't received the formal request, but we've had some conversations and we're in a back and forth, and they seem very interested and very willing to do what they can at their institution to provide more opportunities for students. If you are an IHE and you're on the line and you expressed interest, I can tell you that we're basically in a holding pattern waiting for our EGMS vendor to create what we call a budget shell in EGMS. I put in the request for that in the first week of March, and they told me it would take 6 weeks. That's kind of how long things were taking at the time. And we're just about at 6 weeks. So I'm going to be knocking on their door in a few days, asking where we are. And when they give me the go ahead, I'm going to be communicating with all of you, the IHEs, about what we need in that budget shell. So you should definitely be thinking about how you're going to want to use the funds that we've told you your institution is eligible for. And that way it can all be documented with some level of detail, because there's not a separate application for this grant. So we are going to want some detail in your budget as far as your expectations about how you're going to be spending the money. And I heard a chat come in. Let's see, we have teachers writing curriculum over the summer, and that's where most of our funds are allocated. We ended up with different courses approved than were originally budgeted. Does the budget description need to match the reimbursement submissions exactly if they're in the same budget category? I would say exactly. I do want the budget descriptions to reflect what you're asking for reimbursement. It's interesting because some districts were very specific in what they put in the budget shell. And I know I just said IHEs should be very specific, but IHEs aren't putting in a formal plan. They're just putting in a budget, where the districts actually gave us a plan. And so some of those budget statements in EGMS are pretty general. If yours was very specific and you are really doing something quite different, then I would go into the budget and just make an adjustment to the budget narrative. And just give me a heads up in advance. I've been dealing with this with quite a few districts who wanted to make little tweaks. As long as I know it's coming, once it gets put through EGMS, I usually just approve it in the same day if it all makes sense to me. So that would be my guidance on that question. The other thing I would note is that Ajit and I were actually talking about this earlier today. You know, we know districts put in their plans pretty on a pretty short timeline. You didn't have a lot of time to really get in touch with the IHEs, make sure teachers were on board, get input from students on what that plan was going to be. So things are changing, and that's completely fine. And so we have gone back and forth, Ajit and I, on how are we going to document what those changes are, because you've all been great in sending me notes and letting me know how you're changing it. And I really appreciate those notes because it helps me have a better conversation with people who are interested in this grant. And I can talk about what those changes are, or those proposed changes are that I've seen. But we have said we're going to do some sort of final reconciliation at some point. We didn't really talk about timing yet, where we said, now that you have actually started to implement your plan and ask for reimbursement, how did your plan change? So we'll probably ask probably in a survey form, which IHEs did you end up partnering with? Which courses are being expanded or added? And so we have at the end, we can move from that plan document that we have posted on the Dual Credit Opportunity site to something that more accurately describes the district activities connected to that dual credit expansion grant. See, I see another question here from Chris. For budget planning purposes, is there an estimated timeline for when the IHE grant funds would be dispersed? When spending can commence if all goes according to plan with the portal and review process? I'm going to have to confirm with Ajit on this one, but my guess is it would be fairly immediate. It's almost like once EGMS has that budget shell ready and it's approved by us, then the spending or the reimbursement can start. But Chris, I'll make a note to be sure to get back with you and other IHEs on the definitive answer for that. Let's see. You write a note to myself that will make sense when I go back to it. Okay. Any other questions, comments, concerns to this point? Okay, I'm not seeing any, so I am going to move on. Just another update on NACEP, again, the National Alliance for Concurrent Enrollment Partnerships. As I've mentioned many times at this point, we executed a 3-year contract with NACEP, and with the idea that we are expanding access to dual credit opportunities for students, but at the same time want to ensure that we have high quality programs, high quality opportunities for students. So NACEP is really a key partner in that effort. And they're offering us technical assistance over that 3-year period. And some of that technical assistance is connected to a webinar series that they'll be doing for us. We've already had one, Promoting Program Quality, that was on March 13th. If you were interested in that recording, I just sent the link to the recording around last night, and it is posted on our dual credit opportunities page. We had some bumps in the road in getting it posted. So, but it's there now. And I would really encourage you to take a look at that recording. I think they did a really great job. They had a panel of presenters. So you got to hear from a variety of different perspectives on program quality. The next session is on April 25th. Registration is already open for that. I've sent a couple of reminders about that. I think we have at least 30 or so people registered so far. I would encourage you to register for that. Then we have one on student supports and the student experience. I want to make sure that I have a full description of the session before I open registration. So that's the only thing I'm waiting for. That date is solid. We do have a 2-day in-person event that it is scheduled to happen at Gateway Community College in New Haven. We don't have all the contract signs and all the, the I's dotted and the T's crossed, but the dates are August 13th and 14th. CT State has confirmed that they can accommodate us, and so we'll have some details coming soon on that. And then finally, the last in the webinar series is in November. So this is collecting and using program data. So again, registration will be forthcoming and you'll get an update about that. And I see Chris Todd from UConn, home of the national champions. Congratulations on that. UConn is hosting the spring NESEP. I think I said that right, Chris. If you wanna speak to that, feel free to unmute yourself. I always tend to say that incorrectly. Why don't you go ahead?
Sure. Yeah. No, thanks, Renee. Yeah, we're hosting the annual spring NEASEP conference. So it's the New England Alliance of Concurrent Enrollment Partnerships on the Storrs campus on May. So I just put the link in the chat, and it's really focused around the student experience. And so we'll be inviting institutions, post-secondary and secondary, from across the region. So it's Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Vermont, and Maine. Thanks, Renee.
I think you're welcome. Thank you for sharing that. And I think I mentioned in the last community of practice that Ajit and I attended last year's NEASEP in Providence. And I thought the sessions were great, relevant to institutions of higher ed and high schools that have concurrent enrollment programs ongoing. I thought there was a lot of really useful information. So I would encourage you to check that out. One other NASEP related update, we built out a section of the dual credit opportunities site that is focusing on NASEP events, standards and accreditation. We're going to be, it's in progress, it's sort of under construction, but it's there. And you can click around on that page, check out the resources we have. I have connected with our NASEP partners to ask them to provide me with any of the most important resources that they think IHEs and their district partners need. And so we'll be populating that section of the site with that information. But that is the section of the dual credit opportunity site where you'll find the link to the NASEP webinar that we had last month. So you'll see that recording there. And I continue to update this page, the landing page of the dual credit opportunities page site with all of our recordings for the community of practice as well. So you can find those resources there. And I see Ajit has joined us, which is excellent, because we are segueing into the report to the legislature that I said we had mentioned in a previous meeting, but I think Ajit wants to go into a little more detail about what we have provided to the General Assembly.
Thanks, Renee. And I was monitoring the chat as I was in the other meeting, and I noticed some questions about money and stuff. Were there any lingering things from that side, or are we good?
I think the one thing that I said I would get back to Chris at Eastern on and all the other IHE partners is the timeline as far as Once the budget shells are ready, I explained that
Yeah.
that is imminent.
Yeah.
And then we approve that detailed budget.
Yep.
Then is that when the reimbursement can begin, or is there some
Yes.
other waiting period?
No, so once you submit, we approve the budget, our fiscal office approves the budget. Once fiscal approves the budget, then you're ready to begin seeking reimbursement for expenses. And we're dating the grant starting with July 1 of 23, so that you can actually attribute expenses in this year toward the grant. I mean, that's kind of the reason why we're doing that. And you will be able to submit for fund requests right after fiscal approval is received. And because, I mean, the timing, unfortunately, is what it is. The fiscal year ends June 30th, but you really need to get your fund requests in for this year's expenses, the 23-24 academic year expenses, by early June. So, so I have your budgets ready. Once the shell is open, please go ahead and submit as soon as possible with as much detail as possible so that we can review and approve promptly so that you can then seek reimbursement. And of course, if you're contracting with these funds, if you're contracting with a third party, or if you're a private IHE, you will have a much longer window to spend your money. So if you're a public university and you contract with a vendor to provide enrollment management services or whatever, so that you're not paying your state employee staff salaries, but you're paying for expenses that you're contracting for. In that case, as long as you execute the contract and create the PO this calendar year, by December 31st, you will be able to spend it for 2 more years until December 26th. So you'll have a much longer runway if it's contracted expenses or if you're a private university. But if you're a public university, just make sure you get the contracts out. So that's the most important thing there. And I talked to the EGMS, the grant people, today, and they're prioritizing it. So hopefully word will come out real soon that the grant shell is ready to go.
And I see Dana put a question in the chat, some small changes. They were approved for different courses. That we're seeing a lot of that for sure. And I would say if the narrative in the budget that's in EGMS is very detailed and doesn't reflect what's happening, then make that budget narrative adjustment in EGMS. If your budget was pretty general and doesn't specify what the courses were, or partners or any of that, then I would say obviously an EGMS adjustment is not necessary, but yes, please send me a note and let me know what you're doing. Just because I mentioned before, it's good to know what the changes are because I am having conversations with folks about what districts are doing. So it's good for me to have a record of that. But we will have, again, as I mentioned, a full reconciliation at the end of what the money was actually used for. Partners, specific courses offered, pathways that were developed, etc. So we will get to that eventually, but in the interim, I'd love to know what those changes are. Nothing formal to me, but just kind of a general summary would be great. Any other questions before Ajit moves on to the report to the legislature?
All right. So the report to the legislature is just an update for you, and it accompanies the next slide. So we basically were required by the legislature to report on our dual credit expansion efforts. So we basically told them all the things we're doing. We told them that we have a state level post-secondary success work group. Some of you are on that work group. We told them about our website. We told them that we have post-secondary readiness leads. We said we've created this community of practice. We talked about our letter campaign that we sent to 9th and 10th graders, encouraging them to take advanced coursework, including dual credit courses. Those are some of the communication and partnerships we talked about. We talked about efforts we're doing around program quality and accountability. We said we're adding this, it's part of our accountability index now. It's part of our next generation accountability system, and the IHEs are sending us data. And side note, we're working on a report, public report, that will show what types of courses are being taken by our students at what IHEs and across what districts, so that you will now be able to see, like, Hartford School District, what IHEs are they working with, and what are their biggest course subscribers. So you'll actually be able to see that down to that level of information, because we want to, again, continue to make that data transparent and facilitate those partnerships across our districts and our IHEs. So that's coming. And Renee has already discussed the NACEP agreement and partnership there. So we're talking about that. We're talking about funding to both to the districts and to the IHEs.
What machines are being used, what machines, like how long there's left. So it's really, really helpful.
I think Dave, yeah, thanks. And then we also made a recommendation, and the one single recommendation is that we should have dedicated annual appropriation at the state level for this. And so to move, and the link to the report, by the way, is on the slide as well. But to move to the next slide, if you haven't seen this, there is Senate Bill 14. And I don't believe this bill has been changed so far. So I think this language is still in there, which is basically asking the department to conduct a study on the regarding the feasibility of setting up a statewide program that supports our high school students to take advanced courses, especially students from low-income families. And advanced courses here is not just dual credit, it also includes AP, IB, Cambridge, etc. And so while this doesn't say appropriation, rest assured that what we're going to be doing as part of this study is trying to cost this out, trying to say how many students are taking it, how many more students could be taking it, and what this could look like in terms of funding this, and also what would be the mechanics of making something like this work. So we will be sort of discussing that as part of this project, part of this this study, and we're excited about the opportunity to do this and sort of make that case. Any questions on the bill or the report itself? All right. If nothing else, then we can move to the last item. And Renee, can I just do a demo of it? Is that probably the best thing to do? Okay. I don't know if any of you have seen this new dashboard that we launched on labor and earnings. Let's see. Let me share my screen. So what we're doing here is really looking at the earnings of our high school graduates after they leave high school, earnings in Connecticut, and we're separating that out based on their college credential attainment, college attendance and credential attainment rates. So for example, this chart is showing the high school graduating class of 2007. The blue line represents those who earned a college credential, and this is their trajectory going from 2008, first year after high school graduation, all the way to 2022, which is 15 years after high school graduation. So students who were part of the high school class of 2007, we're showing their earnings 15 years out, Connecticut's high school graduates. And we're able to sort of show how the college credential earners do compared to those who don't earn a college credential. Make sense? Okay. So clearly in the early days, those who don't have a credential seem to earn a little bit more because they're more immediately in the workforce. But then once the college credential earners, once they complete college, clearly they're and attain that credential, their earnings trajectory changes. Now we can go to a more recent graduating class. We have fewer years to look forward to, but the trend is the same. And in this case, just to define this, college credential does not just mean bachelor's and master's. It also includes associates, and it also includes certificates. So let me break this out by certificate. So here now we have sort of broken out this data. The blue line is bachelor's or higher. The orange is an associate's. This gray with a triangle is a certificate, and then some college and then no college. So you get to see kind of what the earnings trajectories are for our high school graduates after they leave. And you can do that for any future class. So here's for the class of 2011, certificate earners actually are doing even better than no college or some college. So just going to college for the sake of going to college is not really productive. You have to earn some college credential, the difference. You can also break this out by race, ethnic. Oops, what happened there? See, there we go. Race, ethnicity, high needs. You can also look at industry of employment, which is kind of which person is working. So, somebody in finance doesn't mean they're doing actuarial work necessarily. They could be a manager in finance. They could be in HR, but working in the finance industry. So this represents the industry in which the person is working. But you can see, like manufacturing, for example, you notice that even for non-college credential earners, their earnings are, they're not as high as college credential earners, but they're better than non-credential earners in other industries. So certain industries, you can sort of try to find your way better without a college credential than others. Take retail, for example. Both college credential holders and non-credential holders are earning less than those who go into manufacturing without a college credential. So again, it's providing some contextual data as to what's going on. There's also an interactive report tab, which now takes this to the next level of drilling down, if you will. So for one, I can pick the graduating class, which I was able to do in the prior chart. So it starts off with statewide data, but now I can pick a district. I can actually select an individual district and see how do the graduates from that district for that particular graduating class, how are they doing? And right now you notice that the split panels is by gender. So the panels are split, female and male. But I could change that and I could say, show me by free reduced price meal eligibility. So now I have on the left-hand side, those who are eligible for free reduced price meals. On the right side, those who are not eligible for this particular district. And if you don't see a line, it means there's not enough students in the denominator to make the calculation. So I can pick all students and then it'll be one, no split panels. I could also do it based on the type of credential earned, the highest credential, and then it'll give me, again, I'm in a particular district here for the class of 2010, so you could see bachelor's versus some college versus no college in this case. And it gives you it gives you the N sizes too for each district. So you can pick any district and look at the data for that particular district for that particular graduating class. So pretty detailed data, and there's also a data table available, so you can actually see how many students we're talking about in this count here. So we're looking at the class of 2010, and you get to see how many students are actually showing up in the data in each year. And these are based on wages from the Department of Labor. So we're actually matching to actual real wages. And one last thing I'll mention, this gray line is minimum wage. And all the wages in these charts have been inflation adjusted to 2022 wages. So they're reflected in 2022 dollar terms, if you will, so that you can compare apples to apples. So I think it's a pretty exciting report and something we're going to continue doing every year now going forward. So any questions on this particular report? We have some enhancements planned too, but are there any questions that come to mind as you look at these data? No? Good. Okay, so some other enhancements we're contemplating are degree earned. We're actually going to get that data from the National Student Clearinghouse, so they're supposedly going to give us more precise degree information. So we're going to sort of try to parse this based on the type, like actual major that was earned. So biology majors versus English majors versus art majors versus whatever, like engineering majors. We'll be able to actually look at that and look at earnings trajectories based on the major. That's one enhancement that's being contemplated. There's a couple other things too. I think we also want to go, right now we go up to the class of 2016, and you'll see what happens here, right? For the class of 2016, we only have 6 years to look forward to. So you don't see sort of that longitudinal long-term view, but you see the pattern is kind of similar right from the get-go. We've had a request from more recent cohorts, even if it only shows 2 years of data, so that they could see how the how the students are doing. The reality will be in those 2 years is that nobody would have earned a college credential. The fact these students who are reflected here as college credential earners are based on the fact that they earned a credential in 7 years after high school within 7 years after high school graduation. So we sort of map that back to their first year. But if we just look at the first 2 years of data after high school, we won't know who's earned a credential or not. So we'll have to figure out how we report that data. But again, we've got a few enhancements planned, but pretty exciting report. And here's the technical high school students who tend to have better wage outcomes right out of college. Long term, these even out, but at least right out of college, our tech school students tend to have better earnings. All right, Renee, I think that's my update. I don't think there are any questions or hand raise. I think it's a lot of data to absorb. But this is the link is in the. I could put the link in the chat too, and you can play around with it if you haven't already found it. But
And I think that wraps up the content that we had sort of on the agenda for today's session. So we can open it up for other questions or comments, information that you need that we can provide. Okay, I think we're good. So for you IHE partners on the line, you'll be hearing from us very soon. My fingers are crossed. It'll be very soon. And I don't know what our plan is for getting specific instructions to the group. Maybe we'll have a little information session, informal, go through the process once we know that budget shell is available. So you can get right to work and get those reimbursement requests in on a tight timeline. And district folks, if you have any lingering questions or you need my support, please reach out and we'll help you as quickly as we can. Have a great afternoon, everyone, on this beautiful day. Enjoy the sunshine, and we'll see you next month.